Imagine this, a tiny island, no oil, no gold, no diamonds, no farmland to grow massive crops, no huge army to protect itself, no big rivers or mountains to shape an empire. Just heat, humidity, mosquitoes, and a swamp. This was Singapore in 1965, the year it became independent. The odds were against it. Even the British, who once ruled it, thought it was doomed. Neighbors doubted it would survive. Some predicted it would become a poor backwater, begging for aid. And yet, less than 60 years later, Singapore became one of the richest nations on Earth. Today, its GDP per capita rivals the wealthiest countries. Its skyline glitters with skyscrapers. Its port is one of the busiest in the world. Its passport opens doors almost anywhere. So how did a small island with nothing turn into a global powerhouse? The answer is not oil, not gold, not luck. The answer is something far more powerful. This is the story of how Singapore got rich without oil or gold, and why its success shocks the world. Chapter 1. The Harsh Beginning. In August 1965, Singapore was suddenly thrust into independence after being expelled from Malaysia. It wasn't a planned victory march, it was a desperate break. The tiny island had just been told to fend for itself, and few believed it could survive. The problems were overwhelming. The population was exploding, yet jobs were scarce. Unemployment hovered around 14%, and many families lived in overcrowded shophouses or wooden huts without running water or sewage. Racial riots between Chinese and Malays had erupted just 2 years earlier, leaving scars of distrust. The economy was fragile, relying mostly on a small port and British military spending. Security was another nightmare. The Singapore Armed Forces barely existed. The island had no natural resources, no oil wells, no fertile farmlands. Not even enough fresh water. Every drop of drinking water had to be piped in from Malaysia under uneasy agreements. To many outsiders, Singapore looked like a country destined to fail. On national television, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew broke down in tears. He admitted the separation was a moment of anguish. Yet those tears were not surrender. They were a spark. Behind the grief was a fierce determination to prove the doubters wrong. Lee and his team understood a hard truth. Singapore had nothing the world wanted, except its people and its strategic location. That meant survival would depend on building a disciplined, educated, and united population, while creating an economy attractive to global trade and investment. The gamble was bold: turn weakness into strength and transform a swampy, divided city into a world-class hub. From this crucible of crisis, the Singapore miracle was born. Chapter 2. The Power of Location. Singapore's one natural advantage was geography. Perched at the tip of the Malay Peninsula, it sat directly on the Strait of Malacca, the narrow waterway linking the Indian Ocean to the South China Sea. For centuries, this strait had been the lifeline of global commerce. Spices, silk, and gold once passed through it. Later, oil tankers, electronics, and automobiles. Even today, nearly 1/3 of the world's traded goods worth trillions of dollars sail through those waters. But location by itself guarantees nothing. History is filled with countries on trade routes that remained poor. What set Singapore apart was its ability to transform geography into strategy. From the earliest days of independence, Singapore's leaders decided, if ships were passing by, they must stop here. To achieve that, they invested heavily in infrastructure. The Port of Singapore was modernized with deep berths and container terminals, just as global shipping was shifting from loose cargo to massive containers. Customs procedures were streamlined: no bribes, no endless paperwork, no wasted days. Time became money, and Singapore saved shippers both. The airport was built with the same philosophy. Changi wasn't just an airstrip, it was designed as a world-class gateway. Efficient, clean, and welcoming, it became a model for the world. Airlines and travelers quickly learned that Singapore wasn't just a stopover, it was the best stopover. By the 1980s, the island had turned into a vital middleman of world trade. Oil from the Middle East, raw materials from Africa, manufactured goods from Asia, all converged in Singapore before reaching Europe or America. The government even developed free trade zones where cargo could be stored, processed, or re-exported without extra taxes. Today, the Port of Singapore is one of the busiest on Earth, rivaled only by giants like Shanghai. Changi Airport is consistently ranked the best in the world, serving over 100 airlines that connect to hundreds of cities. Singapore didn't just sit on the map, it leveraged its position. It turned location into destiny, and destiny into wealth. Chapter 3: Clean and Honest Government. Corruption is the silent killer of nations. It eats away at trust, slows down growth, and strangles opportunity. In many young countries, independence brought hope, but also leaders who treated power like personal treasure. Singapore could easily have gone down that road, but it didn't. Lee Kuan Yew and his team made one of the boldest choices in modern politics: to make honesty the foundation of the new nation. From day one, Singapore declared war on corruption. This was not symbolic. It was surgical, removing every sign of rot before it could spread. The Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, CPIB, a small anti-corruption agency, was given sweeping powers. No one was untouchable. Ministers, judges, police officers, if they accepted bribes, they were punished. High-profile cases proved the point. Even senior officials faced jail when caught. Singapore's leaders understood that integrity had to start from the top. But punishment alone wasn't enough. The government also redesigned incentives. Civil servants and ministers were paid competitive salaries, comparable to what they could earn in the private sector. The logic was simple. If you pay people fairly, they won't need to steal. At the same time, the law was unforgiving. Anyone caught abusing public trust would face harsh penalties. This mix of fair pay and strict discipline worked. Over time, corruption lost its grip. Singapore transformed into one of the cleanest governments in the world. Today, it consistently ranks at the top of global transparency indexes. That honesty became an economic weapon. Investors from Europe, America, Japan, and later China trusted Singapore. They knew that contracts would be honored, courts would deliver justice, and deals would not vanish into the pockets of corrupt officials. While other nations drowned in bureaucratic red tape, Singapore built a reputation for efficiency and fairness. In the global marketplace, trust is worth more than gold. And trust was exactly what Singapore sold. Chapter 4: Education, the real gold. Natural resources can disappear, but knowledge only grows. Singapore's leaders understood early that their greatest investment was not in land or minerals, but in minds. Education would be the country's true treasure. In the late 1960s and 1970s, Singapore launched an aggressive campaign to build schools and expand access to learning. Children who once lived in slums were now sitting in classrooms. Teachers were trained to world-class standards, and a strong emphasis was placed on discipline, mathematics, and science, the skills needed for a modern economy. One of the boldest moves was making English the working language. This was not an easy choice. Singapore was and still is a multi-ethnic society, with Chinese, Malay, and Indian communities. Choosing one group's language could have fueled division. Instead, English became the neutral bridge. It united communities at home while connecting the island to the global marketplace. This decision paid off beyond imagination. As multinational corporations looked for regional bases in Asia, Singapore stood out. Unlike many countries in the region, communication was seamless. Engineers, bankers, and managers could work with partners in London, New York, or Tokyo without a language barrier. But education wasn't only about language. Singapore built polytechnics and technical institutes to train workers in electronics, shipping, and engineering. Later, universities like the National University of Singapore rose to global rankings, producing world-class scientists, doctors, and entrepreneurs. By the 1980s, Singapore's education system was already outperforming richer nations. Its students consistently topped international exams, proving that a disciplined and merit-based approach could compete with the best. Every graduating class became a new natural resource, a renewable stream of human capital, fueling factories, banks, laboratories, and research centers. In truth, education became Singapore's oil. Each graduate was like a barrel of refined energy driving industries forward, sparking innovation, and keeping the economy resilient even when global trade slowed. The message was clear: nations don't need gold mines if they can build knowledge mines. And Singapore built one of the richest. Chapter 5: The Rule of Law and Safety. Wealth doesn't grow in chaos. Investors don't put money where contracts are broken, where gangs control streets, or where governments can't guarantee safety. Singapore's leaders understood this truth better than most. If they wanted the island to become a hub of global business, they had to make it one of the safest, most orderly societies in the world. From the beginning, Singapore built a justice system that combined fairness with firmness. Laws were clear, consistently applied, and strictly enforced. Corruption was rooted out not just in government offices, but in the police and courts, ensuring justice wasn't for sale. Crime was dealt with swiftly. Harsh penalties for drug trafficking, organized crime, and violent offenses sent a clear message. Singapore would not tolerate lawlessness. At the same time, community policing, strong social policies, and education programs prevented many from falling into crime in the first place. The result was a society where both punishment and prevention worked hand in hand. This commitment to order went beyond crime. The government enforced rules on cleanliness, urban planning, and public behavior. Littering, vandalism, and reckless acts that might seem small elsewhere were taken seriously in Singapore. It wasn't about controlling people, it was about creating a culture of respect for shared spaces. For ordinary citizens, the result was a remarkable sense of security. Children could walk to school safely. Women could travel alone at night without fear. Businesses could operate without constant worry about theft or fraud. Tourists, too, noticed the difference. Millions came every year, drawn not only to shopping and modern architecture, but to the peace of mind that Singapore offered. For foreign investors, this environment was gold. In a region often marked by political instability and corruption, Singapore stood out as a safe haven. Companies from America, Europe, and Japan felt confident that contracts would be honored, disputes would be fairly resolved, and their people would be safe living and working there. Order became an economic asset. Stability became wealth. And Singapore proved to the world that safety is not just about protecting citizens, it's about unlocking prosperity. Chapter 6: Smart Economics. Here's the clever part. Singapore didn't try to do everything. It chose carefully, focused sharply, and executed with discipline. This was not an economy of chance, it was an economy of strategy. In the early years, the government realized that to survive, it needed jobs fast. So, Singapore invited multinational corporations to set up factories. Electronics, petrochemicals, textiles, and shipbuilding became the backbone of its manufacturing base. The strategy worked. Unemployment dropped, and workers gained valuable industrial skills. Unlike many countries that feared foreign companies, Singapore embraced them, but always with conditions. The government required technology transfer, local hiring, and reinvestment, ensuring that Singaporeans, not just foreigners, benefited. Once a solid industrial base was secure, Singapore made its next move: climb the economic ladder. By the 1980s and 1990s, manufacturing shifted toward high-value products, semiconductors, precision engineering, pharmaceuticals. Soon after, the country expanded into finance, banking, and biotechnology. Singapore became a regional hub for multinational banks, insurance companies, and later, tech giants. Taxes were kept low to attract global firms, but efficiency was demanded in return. Bureaucracy was minimized, corruption eliminated, and infrastructure world-class. Investors knew their money would not vanish into red tape. At the same time, Singapore refused to let corporations run wild. Regulations protected national interests, and industries were strategically guided to avoid over-dependence. Perhaps Singapore's boldest financial move was creating sovereign wealth funds. Temasek Holdings and GIC, Government of Singapore Investment Corporation. Instead of spending all government revenue immediately, Singapore invested its surpluses worldwide in companies, real estate, technology, and even airports abroad. Today, these funds control hundreds of billions of dollars, generating returns that secure Singapore's future. This model gave Singapore resilience. Even when global trade slowed, the nation still earned from its investments abroad. While others scrambled during economic crises, Singapore's careful planning cushioned the blow. It wasn't luck. It wasn't magic. It was intelligent, disciplined strategy, choosing the right industries at the right time, welcoming foreign investment without losing control, and saving wisely for the future. Singapore's wealth didn't come from mines or oil fields. It came from smart economics, turning strategy into prosperity. Chapter 7: Culture of Discipline. Policies and infrastructure may build the foundation of a nation, but it is people who determine whether it thrives. In Singapore's case, what set it apart was not only clever governance, but also a culture of discipline that shaped everyday life. From the beginning, Singaporeans were expected to live by high standards. Hard work was not optional, it was survival. The government instilled a mindset of respect for rules, punctuality, and personal responsibility. Citizens were constantly reminded that their country was small, fragile, and had no second chances. Collective sacrifice was essential. This discipline often came through regulations that, to outsiders, seemed extreme. Chewing gum was banned to keep public spaces clean. Littering, jaywalking, and vandalism carried heavy fines. Drug trafficking was punished with the death penalty. Even small acts of disorder were treated seriously. Because leaders believed that letting little things slide would eventually corrode society's fabric. Was it popular? Not always. Many bristled at the tight rules. Western critics mocked Singapore as a nanny state. But beneath the strictness was a simple logic. Order creates stability, and stability fuels progress. What looked restrictive on the surface built habits that became second nature: cleanliness, efficiency, and respect for the common good. Over time, these habits transformed into strengths. Bureaucracy was efficient because workers were punctual and disciplined. Streets stayed clean because citizens followed the rules. Crime stayed low because punishments were certain. Instead of wasting energy battling corruption, disorder, or inefficiency, Singaporeans poured their focus into growth, innovation, and nation building. This culture also shaped the workforce. Employers around the world recognized Singaporean workers for their reliability, skill, and dedication. International companies felt confident hiring locally because they knew the same discipline that governed society also governed the workplace. In the end, discipline itself became an invisible resource. While other nations struggled with chaos or inefficiency, Singapore surged forward. Habits turned into productivity, rules turned into trust, and discipline turned into wealth. Chapter 8: Innovation without resources. Most nations build prosperity on what lies beneath their soil: oil, gas, coal, or farmland. Singapore had none of it, but instead of seeing this as a curse, it treated scarcity as an invitation to innovate. The question was never, what are we missing, but what can we create? Take food, for example. With almost no farmland, Singapore couldn't feed its population the traditional way. Rather than depend entirely on imports, it pioneered urban solutions. Vertical farms stacked layers of crops growing in high-tech greenhouses were developed to maximize space. Hydroponics and aquaponics turned rooftops and warehouses into miniature farms, producing vegetables with minimal land. Water posed an even bigger challenge. For decades, Singapore relied heavily on Malaysia for its drinking supply, a vulnerability that carried political risks. The solution? Innovation. Desalination plants were built to convert seawater into fresh water. On top of that, new water technology was introduced, recycling and purifying wastewater into ultra-clean drinking water. What once seemed like a weakness became a global model for water sustainability. Innovation wasn't limited to survival. Singapore positioned itself as a hub for cutting-edge industries. In biomedical research, the government created Biopolis, a massive research complex attracting top scientists and pharmaceutical companies. In finance, Singapore became a pioneer in fintech, digital banking, and blockchain technology, building on its reputation as a trusted financial hub. In sustainability, it invested in solar power, green buildings, and electric mobility, aiming to lead the world in eco-innovation. What tied all these moves together was mindset. While other countries complained about their limitations, Singapore treated limitations as opportunities. Every obstacle became a laboratory challenge. Every shortage demanded a creative solution. That relentless spirit turned the island into more than a city-state. It became a living experiment in the future of urban life. From water to food, from medicine to finance, Singapore proved that innovation doesn't begin with abundance. It begins with scarcity, determination, and vision. In the end, Singapore's lack of natural resources didn't hold it back, it pushed it forward. Scarcity bred creativity, and creativity built wealth. Conclusion: rich without oil or gold. So how did Singapore get rich without oil or gold? Not through luck, not through miracles, but through vision, strategy, and discipline. Singapore built its wealth on 5 unshakable pillars. First, location. Geography was its one natural advantage, but location alone means nothing unless you know how to use it. Singapore transformed a busy shipping lane into the beating heart of global trade, turning its port and airport into world-class gateways that connect east and west. Second, clean government. While corruption dragged down many young nations, Singapore chose a different path. Leaders lived by example, laws were enforced without fear or favor, and trust became the currency of growth. This honesty made investors feel safe, and trust, once earned, turned into billions of dollars of investment. Third, education. Instead of oil fields, Singapore cultivated knowledge fields. It invested in schools, universities, and training institutes, making people its greatest asset. English united its diverse communities and connected the island to the world. Every graduate became a barrel of energy, fueling industries, innovation, and progress. Fourth, law and safety. Wealth cannot exist in chaos. Singapore built order-safe streets, efficient courts, and strict laws. It became a place where families felt secure, tourists felt welcome, and businesses felt protected. Stability itself became a source of prosperity. Finally, innovation and strategy. Scarcity forced creativity. With no land, Singapore built vertical farms. With no water, it created new water. With no resources, it turned to finance, biotech, and technology. Every limitation became an opportunity. Every weakness became strength. Together, these pillars carried Singapore from a struggling island in 1965 to one of the wealthiest nations on Earth today. Its success is not measured by what lies underground, but by what its people built above ground. Singapore proves a powerful truth. Nations don't need oil wells or gold mines to be rich. What they need is discipline, vision, courage, and a relentless belief in human ingenuity. So the next time you see that tiny red dot on the map, remember this: size is not destiny. Resources are not everything. Sometimes the smallest places hold the biggest secrets to success. And Singapore's secret is simple. It created wealth not from nature, but from the power of people.